Hey guys, so it's just around I think 6 a.m. I didn't wake up quite as early this morning as I did yesterday, so that's nice. Yes, I am wearing the same shirt because I just woke up. So yeah, I'm here for the second day of my blog, and I thought that I would start with a little bit that I did read last night before going to bed. Um, First off, I read a couple of essays from this passion for books, and there's one quote or a couple of quotes that I really want to read to you. There's an essay in here called "How to Justify a Private Library" by Umberto Eco, and in the first paragraph he writes this: "All through my early years, I believed that, by some strange chance, all the people I met were stupid. Then, having reached maturity, I was forced to conclude that there are two laws no human being can escape. The first idea that comes into a person's mind will be the most obvious one. And, having had an obvious idea, nobody ever thinks that others may have had the same idea before." And then there was a second quote. He's talking about how to respond to someone who walks into your home and sees your gigantic library and says, "Wow, that's a lot of books. Have you read them all?" And this is this is what he concludes with regards to how you should respond. "Now I have fallen back on the riposte, 'No, these are the ones I have to read by the end of the month. I keep the others in my office.' A reply that on the one hand suggests a sublime ergonomic strategy, and on the other leads the visitor to hasten the moment of his departure." Yeah. So anyway, I thought that I was thoroughly amused by that essay. So yeah, looking forward to poking through this essay collection a bit more. And then I read a bit of An Unquiet Mind by Redfield Jamison. She just told a really moving story about a patient that she actually oversaw, who she was the therapist for, who himself had bipolar disorder like her, and he sounds like he was so sick. He would have horrible psychotic episodes. He would be off his meds as soon as his psychotic episodes and mania went away, he would be off his meds, and he would plummet after because when you go off your meds, you become manic eventually again, and then after you become manic, you become horribly depressed, and his depressions were just so black and bleak, and eventually he committed suicide. Yeah, I think that, this book is it's about bipolar disorder, but I think it's about just dealing with mental illness in general, and does that so well so far. So yeah, hoping to work on that more today. And then I also read about 20 pages of The Ancestor's Tale. And some interesting stuff that he talked about. He talked about how fossils are formed, which I have learned about in other books, but it is nice to sort of have a single book that describes the formation of fossils in a little bit of detail at least, so that I can have it as a reference, because it's something I never seem to be able to remember. He also talked about how we calculate not how big human brain size is, but how big human brains are in relation to their bodies as compared to the brain-to-body ratio of every other species of animal. And it was fascinating. I don't think I can do justice to describing it all to you here. It's a little bit complicated, but it was just fascinating. I never knew it was so complicated to determine the brain-to-body ratio, because you can't just look at brain size for a measure of intelligence, because, like, if we did, then whales would be the smartest animals, because they're huge and have gigantic brains. So what you look at is how big is their brain in relation to their body size. And if their brain is, like, oversized in relation to their body, as compared to all other vertebrates in terms of their body to brain size ratio, then they must be really smart. And humans have the biggest, most abnormally large brain of any species that we know so far. So yeah, fascinating stuff. I'm gonna get to reading. I'm gonna go read my 2 cantos of the Divine Comedy. I'm gonna work a little bit on The Battle for God, and probably these other books that I've already talked about. And then other than that, we'll see where I go. Hey guys, so a quick update. I've just finished my reading in The Battle for God. I have about 27 pages left. I'm gonna set it aside for the day and finish it tomorrow. That's was my plan originally, to just split the last section into 2 days. I'll be leaving Britta a nice long Voxer message about the conclusion tomorrow, I'm sure. But you know, I wanted to drop a little update into the video, just because you know, in the last chapter, obviously she's kind of wrapping things up, and she ends at 1999, and the first part of the chapter she talks about Iran and the rule of the Ayatollah Khomeini after the Islamic Revolution there, and it's just fascinating to me. Khomeini, he seems like such a weird, contradictory character, because on the one hand he was kind of a religious fanatic, I suppose. He's had this weird belief in his own legitimacy as the, you know, head of the state in Iran, and you know, you have to think it takes a sort of egotism to believe that you are, you know, God's chosen sort of spokesperson on earth, and a certain amount of psychopathy to allow what he allowed to happen. You know, in the Iran-Iraq War, he sanctioned thousands, millions, I think it was more like millions of young Iranians. I mean, he allowed children who were over the age of 12 to enlist in the army, against their parents' wishes, if they wanted to. And a lot of those youngsters were suicide bombers, would clear minefields, which often involved just sort of running onto the minefield so that the mines exploded and they just, you know, died like that. And thousands of young Iranians died this way, and he saw that as like this great expression of religious devotion, and I mean, I guess you can see it that way, but it must take kind of a psychopath to look at it that way, you know, of sentencing these young people to death like that and thinking that it is that it's somehow divinely sanctioned. But on the other hand, he still, when he was the head of the country, he still seems to have maintained a desire to care for the downtrodden of the country. You know, he wanted to pass, you know, land reforms. He started organizations to help the poor, and he fought against other Shia clerics who, to him, seemed to be acting out of selfishness in the way that they wanted to run the country, which were kind of the platforms that he ran on. He didn't really run for office, but the sort of positions that made him popular under the rule of the Shah, that made the Shah see him as a threat when he got so popular, because of his belief in these sorts of social justice issues. So it's just he's a fascinating, contradictory character, and I would love to read a book about him. So, I don't know, I messaged Britta about that. She said I should just go and ask Steve Donahue, which I probably should just do. But if any of you have recommendations for books about the Ayatollah Khomeini in particular, but Iran in general, I suppose. I want to reading Lolita in Tehran, which I think, after I finish this book, I think I will just jump right into reading Lolita in Tehran. I also have a book called Empire of the Mind, A History of Iran by Michael Axworthy, which I read a few years ago, and it was super readable, super interesting. I ripped through it in only a few days, but this makes me want to reread that. So anyway, I wanted to drop a little update, just because I had some thoughts. So anyway, I'm going to go back to reading. I'm at this point about 30 39 pages, so ways to go till like it's 200. Yesterday I ended up getting to about 140 pages, so I didn't quite make it to 200, but again, my goal wasn't to get to 200 pages every single day, but to get somewhere between 100 and 200, so we'll see how it goes. So anyway, talk to you later, guys. So, another quick check-in. I just read a really nice piece in Due Considerations by John Updike. It was a review of a book about art. There are several essays in here that are like art criticism, like his own essays about artists, but this was a review of a book called Manhattan at Mid-Century by Jed Pearl. And the book is kind of about why New York City became the sort of art capital of the world in the 20th century, whereas before it had been Paris. And Updike doesn't talk that much about that actual subject, but he just has some great takedowns of this book. He kind of he doesn't love the book, so just one sentence I want to read you. His pace enthusiastically picks up with such distinctive artists as David Smith, Joseph Cornell, Alex Katz, and the abstract, pre-cartoony Philip Guston. But our overall impression of being buried in an avalanche of reworked art reviews is reinforced by the inclusion of more and more quotation of other critics, at greatest length Harold Rosenberg and Clement Greenberg. Just that line, our overall impression of being buried in an avalanche of reworked art reviews is just awesome. And the first sentence of the next paragraph is, while one would not mistake Pearl's hip, allusion-rich prose for hot air, it does, in its schematizing, ease, and eager phrase-making, exude some warmth. As warm air will, it can induce a certain grogginess. And then he goes on to quote a sentence from the book. If oil paint was tradition, this is a quote from the book, not from Updike. If oil paint was tradition, collage was a revolution. But of course the kind of painting that was done on 10th Street was very much related to the revolution of Cubist collage. And so the connection between painting and collage was complicated, part of the loopy history of modern art. And then he comments right after that, a sentence like this leads us perilously close to nowhere. It's just awesome. And then his beginning of the next paragraph is also awesome. In his commendable desire to stretch the language of visual perception and philosophical understanding, Pearl coins compound adjectives as if hyphens were snowing upon his word processor. And then he quotes a ton of, this writer uses all these weird sort of compound adjectives, as it just said, like at an angle, go with the flow neighbors, and increasingly knit together, everything is the one thing, homogeneous character, knock in your teeth actualities, and then just quotes a bunch more. And then after that, he says, these statements are symptomatic of the stresses placed on the vocabulary of those who would write about art. It was just a great review. I had a lot of fun reading it. So, anyway, I wanted to check in about that. And then, I've also read a few pieces in, A Passion for Books that I thought were, of note. One of them was interesting. It was a piece, I'm guessing it's from a magazine or something, where a bunch of writers decided on a list of books that they took sort of Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 as their starting point, because in that book, in this dystopian society where books are burned and no longer read, there's a group of people who have books that are really important to them memorized. And so they're sort of the living embodiment of literature in this world where books are burned, where the physical books are burned. And so they compiled a list of the books that they think they would, commit to memory to save if they ever found themselves in that world. And I thought that was a really interesting idea. None of the books on the list were all that striking to me, and I mean, there was like The Sun Also Rises by Hemingway, The Great Gatsby, Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, which is an odd one. And like Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. So pretty basic choices, but it did make me... It was an interesting piece. It made me wonder kind of like, you know, what would be the books that I would want to memorize if I found myself in that world. And I don't know, all the books are all the books that first came to mind are super long, like the Silmarillion and the Iliad, perhaps the Book of Job, the Book of Genesis maybe. Certainly Wallace Stevens' poem Sunday Morning, maybe The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. Some Shakespeare, certainly. Maybe Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear. I don't know, I would have to think about that a bit more. But it's an interesting question. What do you guys think? What would the books that you would memorize if you found yourself in that world, to be the sort of living embodiment of the books that you wanted to preserve? Yeah, let me know. So, anyway, just another check-in. And also the cat has joined me. I'll try to... I hope you can see her, because I don't have any idea what the camera looks like right now, but hopefully... Well, okay. I have no idea if you're seeing her right now, or me. So, anyway, Bessie is here. And she's joining me. She never joins me for long. She never joins me for very long. She always kind of sits here and is happy for 10 minutes or so, and then just skedaddles off. But yeah, this morning hours are her calmest parts of the day, so I relish them. So anyway, I'll sign off for now. I've now made it to 100 pages today. I am hoping to get to 200 today, since I don't have all the extra stuff to do. But I have just finished reading 30 pages of An Unquiet Mind. I have about 80 pages left, and I think I might let the bulk of the rest of the day's reading just be finishing this book, because it's going by really quickly and I'm really liking it. I read a passage today in this book about a friend of Kay Redfield Jamison's who was really important to her while she was horribly depressed throughout her life. She just describes how he would come take care of her. He would call her like at, in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. Just to check up on her, and he would occasionally come over at those really ungodly hours, and he would just, he wouldn't take any of her sort of evasions that depressed people, in my experience, sometimes give, where they say, "Oh no, I'm fine, you don't need to come," blah blah blah, and just really, she says, was the reason that she made it through, and that passage almost brought tears to my eyes. I loved it. I marked it off. I folded down the page. I don't know if you can really see anything, but I folded down the bottom of the page. I imagine that's one I will return to. But she just also talked about her the sort of period in her academic career where she was trying to get tenure, and the sort of insanity of all that. And I'm planning to go into academia, and I'm going into a different field within psychology. I mean, I won't be doing clinical work like she was, but still, it was interesting to get an insight into sort of the craziness that goes into getting tenure, academic tenure. So yeah, very interesting. Hopefully I can report back having finished this book later today. And then I read about 20 pages of The Ancestor's Tale, and he talked about bipedalism and how humans evolved bipedalism and different theories regarding how it evolved. And one particularly fascinating theory that he discusses was one called, I can't remember quite what it was called, but basically it was that our primate ancestors sort of evolved body structures that were amenable to walking on two legs before we ever walked on two legs. So a lot of our ancestors were people who, what was it called? Brachiate? I can't remember the technical term now. But swing, from tree to tree with their hands. And that sort of helped to build a leg structure that was amenable to developing walking. And
And it centers in large part on squatting. I guess eating while squatting is apparently very efficient in some way. And this sort of pressure to be able to do that, the evolutionary pressure to be able to do that, sort of started to form the frame into something like the legs that we now have. And there are other theories as well. Like being able to have the hands free to hold food was very efficient, to store food and such. So anyway, it was just very interesting. So yeah, that's good. But other than that, I that's what I read. Anyway, I'm gonna take a break from reading and probably do some exercise. And yeah, and then I will change into new clothes after a shower. I may actually still go out. I think I might go to shopping for just run a few errands. Maybe also stop at the library for a couple DVDs. But we will see. You will be the first to know. So anyway.
Alright, so I did my exercise. I did an hour and a half on my stationary bike. I'm rather proud of myself for making it through that. Tomorrow I will be getting my exercise by going to the rink, so I'll take you guys to the rink with me. I also, after I exercised, I took a shower and went out for a while. I didn't take you guys with me today just because I don't think it would have been that interesting, but I went to pick up some things from the grocery store that I needed, and I also rented a few movies from the library. Not sure I'm going to get to all of them. They're all kind of long and heavy. Two of them are long. One of them isn't all that long. But and one of them will be a rewatch. But anyway, one is Werkmeister Harmonies, directed by Bela Tarr. I saw Bela Tarr's other, more recent film, The Turin Horse, a while back, and I thought it was excellent. I can't exactly say that I enjoyed it, because it's probably maybe the bleakest film I've ever seen. I was so depressed by it that I had to take a shower and decompress and watch some booktube just to recover from it, because it just, the ending is so depressing. But I liked it a lot, and I like to see some more Bela Tarr's films. So the next one is a film by Ingmar Bergman. This is Persona, his sort of psychological thriller / horror film, which a friend of mine recommended to me, and I also just like Ingmar Bergman. And then finally is Ran, directed by Akira Kurosawa, which I've seen, and which I love the book, I love the movie tag kind of reminded me I would like to rewatch. So anyway, but I won't be doing that today. It's about 3 now, and I am just going to read. I'm probably going to continue with An Unquiet Mind, hopefully finish it, but if not the end of the world, and we'll see what else. So anyway. Hey guys, so this will be my last entry for the day. So I have finished An Unquiet Mind by Redfield Jamison, and I ended up really, really liking it. There are just some lovely scenes and lovely moments that really moved me almost to tears. I really like how unflinchingly Jamison looks at her illness, and unapologetically as well. She kind of talks about the stigma that especially women face for bipolar disorder, especially the mania side of it, because manic behavior, when you're in a manic episode, the behavior is very unfeminine in terms of how we stereotype women and how our society still expects women to behave. But my favorite parts were just the very warm, touching, intimate human moments with people who were close with her. And there's one particularly moving section where she talks about a man who she was very much in love with, who ended up dying of a heart attack in his 40s, and she was devastated by it. But this scene comes from obviously before he died, when he had only just found out that evening, in fact, I think,
that she had bipolar disorder. She was forced to reveal it to him. She'd been hiding it from him, but she was forced to reveal it to him when she accidentally lost all of her medications. She takes lithium to treat her bipolar disorder, and she lost all of her medications while they were in London, and so she needed to get medications as quickly as she could so that she wouldn't become, manic all of a sudden. And so she was forced to tell him. And he responds, in the best way possible. He says, "I say rotten luck." And then he just totally accepted it. But the really touching moment that I just loved was on the next page. One of the side effects of taking lithium is that it makes it very difficult to read. And very difficult to remember what you read and comprehend what you read, and also very difficult, I believe, to pay attention to something for a long time. Or maybe not that, but definitely it makes it difficult to read. And so she told him this, and they're both super literary people who love poetry and books. So this is the passage that I wanted to read to you. I explained to him that due to the relatively rare side effects of lithium that affected... I explained to him that due to the relatively rare side effects of lithium that affected both my vision and concentration, I essentially could not read more than a paragraph or two at a time. So he read to me. He read poetry, Wilkie Collins, and Thomas Hardy, with one arm around me in bed, smoothing my hair now and again, as though I were a child. Moment by moment, with infinite patience and tact, his gentleness and his belief in me, in who I was, and in my basic health, pushed back the nightmare fears of unpredictable moods and violence. So sorry for my inept reading, but it's a lovely human moving moment, and I think a pretty decent demonstration of how novelistically she writes this book. At times it's novelistic, at times it's a bit more analytical and abstract when she talks about just her illness in general, or manic depressive disorder in general, or bipolar disorder. On that sort of more analytical score, there is also a very interesting discussion, I think, towards the end of the book about the term bipolar disorder versus manic depression. She uses the term manic depression, and she actually believes that it's more accurate than bipolar disorder, because saying that the disorder is bipolar doesn't entirely capture the nature of the disorder, or it may not, because depression and mania, even though on the surface they may seem like complete opposites, she does hint that mania may just be a weird, extreme form of depression. And she also just sort of takes issue with this whole idea that changing what term we use really does anything to further to reduce the stigma surrounding an illness. And anyway, it's just a very interesting discussion. So if you're interested in mental health memoirs or mental health in general, then I think this would be a great read for you. I certainly really liked it. I think it may at least be an honorable mention in my top books of the year. I'm not quite sure it'll make it onto the top list because I've read a lot of great nonfiction this year. But we will see when I think that through more. So yeah, really good read. And then I also read several more essays in Due Considerations by John Updike. None of them were quite as delightful as that one that I read to you from earlier today, but they were really interesting. They were more essays about art. This time, these 3 essays were not reviews of books about art, but were reviews of art exhibits. So he writes about Albrecht Dürer, an old I don't know if he was an engraver or I don't know if he was a painter either, though. But anyway, Albrecht Dürer, just look him up. I would show you some of the images in the book if I could, but I'm pretty sure that they wouldn't show up on the screen very well. He writes about Peter Bruegel the Elder, who you may know from his Hunters in the Woods or Hunters in the Snow. And he writes about Piranesi, Giovanni Battista Piranesi, who did a lot of drawings of buildings, of the interior of buildings, which may not sound very interesting, but I thought his essay was kind of cool. I really liked especially how it ended. And some of the... what's great about Updike is that I think his essays are sort of quotable
in the sense that he will make a statement about an artist, which you can imagine applying to many other great artists. And so he's just quotable in that sense, and I like that. And the fact that I've liked the essays in this book so much has made me resolve to read this whole thing next year. But yeah, I want to read this whole collection next year. Yeah, because there's all sorts of writing here about, books, intellectuals, writers, etc. And yeah, so anyway, you'll be hearing about that next year. And then finally, I just wanted to leave you with another poem. I rather liked the poem reading yesterday. And this poem that I want to read you today is from 1966, so we jump forward quite a ways. But it's also a religious poem by a religious poet. It's R.S. Thomas, who was a Welsh poet as well as a pastor. And this poem I thought was really moving, and it's called Pietà. And so here's how it goes. Always the same hills crowd the horizon, remote witnesses of the still scene. And in the foreground the tall cross, somber, untenanted, aches for the body that is back in the cradle of a maid's arms. Okay, sorry, I'm not doing good with reading this evening, but I found that poem incredibly moving, so I hope my bumbled reading of it didn't ruin it for you all, but anyway, I'm trying to do these vlogs in kind of one take, trying to make it, real, so to speak, with as little editing as possible within each sort of clip, so I hope you guys don't mind that. But anyway, so I made it to 200 pages today, so that's good. I hope I can tomorrow. We will see. I am going to the rig tomorrow to skate, so you guys will get a little footage of that, so that should be fun. It will cut into, reading time, because I will be skating for 2 hours tomorrow, I think. Which is awesome. I mean, I love that I'm able to skate that long, because it's vacation, but, it will cut into reading time, but, I love skating. My two great passions in life are reading and skating. But to be totally honest with you guys, if I had to pick one of the two that I could not live without, it would probably be skating, I have to say. Anyway, so that's all for today, and I will see you all tomorrow. So, bye guys. And I look forward to your comments and everything, and, thank you all for watching, of course. So, sorry. Anyway, bye guys.